Welcome everyone to the first public meeting for the Cross County Trail East feasibility study. All attendees are muted and this session is being recorded and will be posted to the project website. We will have about a 30-minute presentation followed by a 30-minute question and answer session. If you have any questions at any time during the presentation, you may use the Q&A feature of the webinar platform to ask a question, and we will then answer it after the presentation. We'll go ahead and get started with the introduction of tonight's speakers. Brian Olszak is a senior open space and trails planner with the Montgomery County Planning Commission and is a project manager for the county. Brian is going to start out with a few words about the project.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight on this virtual meeting. We're glad that you could join us. As Matt said, Matt is actually our planning consultant with us from NV5. They have been employed by the county of Montgomery, and the Planning Commission specifically, to work on this feasibility study for this section of the Cross County Trail. We are in charge of at least 60 miles of regional trail in Montgomery County, and with at least 30 more miles of regional trail that are sponsored by or maintained by our other municipal partners and nonprofit organizations. And I'm really glad to be working on this in particular, since much of this we predict will be in Upper Dublin Township, where I was born and raised, actually. So I'm excited to be with you all tonight, and I'll now let Matt continue his introduction of himself.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, like Brian said, my name is Matt Ludwig. I am the project manager for NV5. We are a planning, engineering, landscape architecture firm located in Philadelphia, and we were selected by the Planning Commission to execute this feasibility study. Brian, I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera off just so we can maximize the screen for folks now. So we're going to start out just by giving folks kind of an overview of what the project entails. This project is what is part of known as part of the circuit trails. And the circuit trails are the regional trail network of the Delaware Valley. I like to equate it to kind of like the interstate system of trails throughout the region. They connect to other counties in the area. They connect beyond the region. The Schuylkill River Trail is probably the best example of one of our circuit trails that connects up into the Reading region and beyond. So where is this project that we're going to be talking about tonight? We're looking in this area right here, this portion of Montgomery County. So if we zoom in on that area, the southeastern corner of Montgomery County, this is where we're going to be looking at. So you can see some of the other trails that are in the area, just to give folks kind of their bearings here. Many folks are probably familiar with the Powerline Trail and the Pennypack Trail, two great area trails. And what this will do is connect those two trails. It will also connect into the Upper Dublin portions of the Cross County Trail. So some folks may be familiar with the Cross County Trail is already completed in portions of Conshohocken and near the Fort Washington SEPTA station. So that's what I just highlighted there in blue. Some of the portions of the Cross County Trail are completed, others that are being studied. We're not going to be focusing on those portions in tonight's meeting. The focus of tonight's meeting and of this planning study is going to be the portion that is circled in blue. And just to give folks another perspective here, so with the circuit trails being kind of that interstate highway system of the regional trail network, if we pare it down just a little bit more, the county has their own trail network. Now, a lot of these trails overlap. A lot of these trails that you see on your screen here that are Montgomery County trails, they are also circuit trails. But some of the trails that are not circuit trails are meant to connect into local communities, local neighborhoods, and then even below that level, we go down into what municipalities have done. So just last year, Upper Township and Hatboro Borough completed a master trail plan. And so just like a street network hierarchy, there is also a trail hierarchy. So all of these things are going to help educate us on how we're going to close this gap in the trail network. And there was a lot of public outreach that occurred with this Upper Hatboro trail plan. We're certainly going to be taking that to heart as we move forward on this plan. So what are the goals of this study? Number one, we want to be able to close a gap in the networks that I just discussed. We want to be able to connect the Pennypack Trail and the future Power Line Trail, and connect to the cross-county trail at Welsh Road. That's really the gap that we're trying to close here. One of the most difficult goals to achieve in this study is going to be finding a feasible trail route that's going to fit into the existing built environment. So this particular area, this trail, it really goes against the grain. There's a lot of physical obstructions. There's a lot of right-of-way issues. If you think about the Pennypack Trail, you think about the Schuylkill River Trail, the Wissahickon Trail, they all follow stream corridors or rivers. And so generally speaking, those tend to be roughly north and south. The cross county is going to connect all those. So it's going to go east to west generally. And that makes it a lot more difficult to make those connections, especially in a built up environment that we're looking at in the southern part of the county. As we study the potential routes, we want to be able to create one that maximizes neighborhood, business, and community connectivity. And we want to do that in an equitable manner. We want this to be able to use this trail to remove barriers from neighborhoods, or at least set up future spur connections. So for example, and we'll get into this in a little bit here with some mapping, most folks that are probably listening right now live on streets that they would consider low stress streets. They might feel comfortable walking or biking down those streets. They might feel comfortable with their kids walking or biking down those streets, but people tend to be landlocked by high-speed roadways, by highways, and what this trail will do is help close those gaps, as many of those gaps as we can. And the fourth goal, we want to be able to find a route that is safe, inviting, accessible, intuitive. We want people to feel like when they get on it, they know where they're going. There's not going to be a whole lot of weird turns and things that are surprises. It's going to be something that just feels comfortable. And when we think about that, we want to be able to design for the maximum amount of users. We want to create the highest demand, the biggest bang for the buck. So we'll talk about this more on the next slide, but we think about something called all ages and abilities. We want to be able to create a trail that allows folks, regardless of ability, to be able to use it. And another design standard we talk about is it's called 8 to 80. We think about when we are designing, would you allow your 8-year-old child to go out and ride their bike along with their 80-year-old grandparent? So that's kind of the design standard that we look at when we're thinking about where these facilities are going to go. So before we go any further, I just want to talk about what is a trail. As you can see on the screen here, there's a few different types of facilities that people think of when they think of trails. So a hiking trail is really meant for foot traffic only. It's not ADA accessible. You can't get wheelchairs out on a footpath like this, and it's not all weather. As soon as it rains, it can be a muddy mess. What we're going to be looking at tonight, and as a part of this study, is how we're going to route a shared use trail throughout the area. So a shared use trail is either paved or it can be a stone dust trail. If you've been on the Montgomery County section of the Pennypack Trail, that would be considered a stone dust trail. It's not paved, however, it is ADA accessible. Width-wise, we want to maintain a 10-foot wide width, and the reason for that is it allows that mix of uses. You've got bicyclists, pedestrians, joggers, other micromobility devices such as scooters. That 10-foot width allows for that mix of uses. It allows for safe passage. It allows two people who want to be side by side walk next to each other, and still allows other folks to pass. Sometimes we also talk about bike lanes being a part of a trail network paired with sidewalks. Now, the issue with bike lanes is sometimes bike lanes they don't fit into that all ages and abilities category, or that 8 to 80 design. You know, something like this, you may not want your child riding on. It's right next to traffic. Traffic may be going fast. So there's issues with that. So what we're looking at as a part of this feasibility study is designing to that shared use trail standard, which with the Circuit Trails Network, that is the standard that they're looking for. And so we use that higher standard for that quote unquote interstate highway system of trails throughout the region. So now that we've got everybody on the same page about what type of facility that we're going to be designing through here, the 10-foot wide shared use trail, we want to go through some mapping here to review the study area and some of the constraints and opportunities that we're going to be looking at throughout the region. So just to get people oriented, this is generally the study area that we're going to be looking at. You see a red X on the left side of your screen. That is the corner of Dreshertown Road and Welsh Road, the promenade development that you may be familiar with that was just recently opened. So there are a few trails that were recently constructed in that area. Those trails will be a part of the Cross County Trail. And that's where our feasibility study that we're talking about tonight here will begin. So as you move from left to right on your screen, you'll see an orange dashed line. That is the future extension of the Power Line Trail. So we'll be wanting to connect into that, obviously, to make that network connection. And then as we move right across your screen or east, you see that we have the Pennsylvania Turnpike, we have the Norfolk Southern Railroad tracks. Those are going to be major obstructions that we'll have to figure out a way how to get around above, to be able to close the gap in the trail network. And then on the far right side of the screen, you see the X. That is where the current Pennypack Trail ends at Byberry Road. That'll be the eastern end of our study limits. So right now we are not presenting a route or route alternatives to the public. What we want to be able to do is give folks the background of the project, let folks know what are the type of things that we're going to be looking at when we're studying route alternatives, and then here in a few minutes we'll get into some details about how you can get involved, and we want to know from the public where are places in this study area that you want to connect to. If we have to route this trail north of the Turnpike, do you want to be connecting to the Hatboro SEPTA station? If we have to go south of the Turnpike, do you want to be connecting to Upper Moreland High School? So the feedback that we're going to get here after this meeting tonight and over the next few weeks from the general public is really going to help shape how these route alternatives are going to shake out. So again, the physical constraints are really going to play a part into it, but they're not going to be the only driver to what we're looking at here. We will also want to think about the socioeconomic breakdown of the area. So we're looking at things like foreign-born population. We're looking at the demographics of the area, thinking about who are the disadvantaged populations, where are they in this area? Things like older adults who may not have driver's license anymore, have that ability to get around as easily. Folks may want to be able to connect to the YMCA. How can we help the greatest amount of population here as we do this study? So older adult population, you can see there's a higher percentage toward the eastern part of the region. Disabled population. We have a census tract here in the middle of the study area that has over a 20% disabled population. So we want to identify where those people are and listen to them. We want to be able to get feedback from those folks and understand how would they connect to a trail and how do they want to get there and what are the destinations that they're looking for. Because we're not only thinking about this from a recreational standpoint, we're also thinking about this from a transportation standpoint. People want to use these type of facilities to get to the grocery store, to go to the movies, to go to work. And then this is another slide we have here just showing percentage of households in each census tract that do not have any cars. So, especially in a suburban area like this, where you think about 10% of, over 11% of households in a given tract do not have cars. They're really landlocked here between the Turnpike and two sets of highways. So it's really difficult to get places if you don't have those connectivity alternatives. So we take a look at that, at those demographics, that data. This is another piece of data that we're going to be looking at too, where the Regional Planning Commission has mapped out streets that have what they would consider a lower stress. So what you're looking at here, the different colors are those clusters of streets that are connected to one another. Think about the island. It's almost like perhaps a neighborhood of streets that are connected to one another. So these are what are called traffic stress level, or LTS. So just to give people a really quick primer, we won't go too much into detail about this, but there's 4 different levels of LTS. And this is really more related to bicycling than it is to walking, but it can also have an effect on walking. LTS 1 and 2 are more comfortable streets. They're calm, traffic moves slower. It's either a narrower street or a quieter street, or it has perhaps a protected bike lane on it. Whereas the LTS 3 and 4 streets are much more stressful. They're higher traffic, higher traffic volumes, higher traffic speeds. They are not the kind of streets that most people want to go out and ride a bicycle on. So what we do with this mapping, you can see that those higher stress streets, higher stress roads, I should say, they're white. You can barely see them in the background of this map. And it's the colors that you see. So the maroon streets, if you live on a maroon street and you have a friend that also lives on a maroon street, you can find a path. It may be kind of a zigzaggy path, but you can find a path to get there by staying exclusively on these low stress streets. But if you want to connect to somebody that lives on one of the green streets up in Hatboro, you have to get on a higher stress street to be able to make that connection by bicycle. So what the trail can do through here, and by making spur connections from the trail to these neighborhoods, is you now want to be able to have one color on this map. So that way, if you live in neighborhood A, you can perhaps ride your bike a few blocks to get to the trail on a low stress street, and then ride your bike perhaps a mile or 2 to get to another neighborhood that also has low stress streets. So we close the gaps in the network by being able to do that.
Hey Matt, if I could jump in a moment, if you could go back, to this map here. So this data about low stress streets is we find very important at the Planning Commission, because we also use this same data for our bike planning. So we have a recent document called Bike Monco, which is essentially the county's bicycle network plan, and in it, we describe a lot of policies about this very issue, about these islands of low stress neighborhoods and streets. And then in that document, we explain a lot of ways that we can connect these various networks through on-road bicycle facilities. So it's a slightly different application of the same principle, but it's also another way of trying to connect these various these various neighborhoods together, which are sometimes separated by just a single major road, like York Road in this example here. Sometimes you can have neighborhoods on both sides of the street, but just crossing the street can be pretty tricky sometimes. So we hope that through these various planning strategies that we can enable more connections through trail and bike planning as well.
Thanks, Brian. And that's to go to the next slide now. If you see the recently completed Upper Moreland Hatboro Trails Plan, definitely seeks to address those gaps and create those connections to connect neighborhoods. So like I said earlier, we're definitely going to be using this plan as a guide to help us think about this regional trail that we're putting together, but also thinking about the local connections as well. Just a couple more data sets just to inform people the kind of things that we're thinking about at this stage. We've mapped out steep slopes. We want to be able to create a comfortable trail, an ADA accessible trail. So we try to avoid areas that have steep slopes, wetlands, other environmental constraints. The Pennypack Ecological Resource Trust, that area is a sensitive habitat. Anything that potentially would come close to that area, we want to be very careful about. We'll be working with them as a stakeholder. Beyond that, there's plenty of other, obviously the Pennypack Creek extends through this area. There's many habitats and wetland areas there that we have to consider. And then this map, I'm not going to go through this in a lot of detail, but it just gives folks an idea of some of the opportunities and constraints that we're considering at this early stage. Some of the biggest ones, thinking about opportunities, are we have to cross the Pennsylvania Turnpike and we have to cross the Norfolk Southern tracks somewhere along the way. So we've taken an inventory of, the Pennsylvania Turnpike bridges and seeing, where are the areas where the bridges are wider. We can make some modifications to the existing structures or modifications to the grading in those areas where we can squeeze the trail in along those areas. We're looking at utility rights of way. So PICO is a partner in a lot of trail projects, and they have space where they need access to get to their utility poles to be able to do maintenance on their lines. So it can be kind of a mutual agreement to be able to use trails for their access needs, but then allow the general public to access as well. And then, of course, we want to be able to create a multimodal environment here. We want trails to connect to transit. First mile, last mile connections are really important. So folks that live in a neighborhood, they might live a couple miles away from the transit station, from the SEPTA station, they want to get to it. Perhaps they can bike 2 miles to get to the SEPTA station, lock their bike up, and then get on the train and go to work. So those are the type of things that we're going to be looking at. And then we're also looking at where are places, like I said, this is a built up environment and there's not a lot of natural corridors that we can follow. So we'll be looking at streets that we could potentially repurpose. But again, this is an example of a street that's within the study area. I'm not at all saying that this is where the trail will go. I'm strictly using this as an example. If we were to decide to take a look at this to see if this was feasible, we would have to do a traffic analysis to see if it was even possible to modify this 3-lane street down to a 2-lane street. So I just want to make sure folks are aware that this is not being examined yet. It could be a potential route, but we'd have to work with PennDOT and make sure that it would be feasible given the current traffic numbers. Some of the physical constraints that were on that map that I showed earlier, you know, especially with the railroad, Norfolk Southern is a difficult entity to work with. They have a very publicly stated policy where they do not allow trails to run parallel to their railroad tracks. They have very narrow bridges. So crossing the Norfolk Southern right-of-way is going to be one of the most challenging aspects of this project. Overhead utilities, you know, we have to consider that when we're trying to route the trail. As I said earlier, we're thinking about wetlands, steep slopes, and right-of-way, property ownership. We don't want to be, we want to try to use as much publicly available space as possible. So now I mentioned PECO. PECO's a private entity, but they are a utility that has worked with entities in the past to route trails. Those are the kind of spaces that we may need to use to get from point A to point B in this project to be able to connect the other public spaces that we're looking at along here. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to pull up the virtual project map. This is one of the feedback tools that we want to use with the public tonight. So give me a second here and I will get that pulled up on my screen. So most people here probably signed up for the meeting tonight through the county's website. So if you go back to the county's website, which is montcopa.org/cross-county east, cross-county trail east, sorry. If you go to that website, it will redirect you to the project website where you registered for this meeting. Now, we just updated the website today. If you go down to this public feedback section, you'll see 2 items here. One where you can take a short survey. It only takes about 3 or 4 minutes. It's very quick. So we want everybody to take that survey first. So that survey looks like that. I'm not going to take it right now. But once you're done with the survey, you can then be directed to the virtual project map. So once you get to the virtual project map, it wants you to enter your email address. And the reason it does that, one, we can send you notifications about future public outreach on the project. And 2, it logs whatever comments that you make on here, it logs it to your email address. So if you come back a week later and realize, oh man, you know, I have another comment I want to make, you can re-enter your email address in here and you can edit that comment. You can make other comments. You can attach pictures to comments. So that's what makes this map pretty cool to work with. So once you get into the map, there's different things you can do. And there's instructions here at the top to guide you on how to use it. You can do 2 different things. You can add routes and you can add points. So if you click on add points, you can click on key destinations. So you can click on a destination. What is something that you would like to go to? You could click on Upper Moreland High School and say, I want to walk to Moreland High School. And then you can submit that comment. You can even upload a photo. Another type of point that you can add is a barrier, an unsafe area. Maybe you already walk or bike through this area trying to connect from the Pennypack to the power line trail. What are some of the things that you see are problems and that you would like to see as a part of this trail project potentially be fixed? So you can click on that one. You click on the map where that point is, and you have the ability to zoom in and out, just like a Google map. you can click on that point and you can say this intersection is dangerous. And you can, again, you can upload a photo of that specific instance. You can go into more detail. And then what you can also do, somebody has already left a comment that says, I would love to bike to the YMCA. You can click on that comment. You can say that you agree or disagree, and then you can even add your own comment. We could turn this into a conversation if we wanted to, and go from there. So it's a really cool interactive tool. We hope the public gets involved in this, and really that's going to help. Like I said before, that's going to help drive where this routing can go. If there's a really high interest in getting to a certain destination, then that's going to help drive where the route alternatives go. So we have two red icons on here that show where the trail, where this trail starts, where the trail ends. So it gives you an idea. There's kind of a dashed gray oval on here to give you the general sense of the study area that we're looking at across here. If you have an idea for a specific route that you want to see, or even just a portion of a route, so you can click on this add route button, click on it. I would recommend turning the snap to route option off, because then it won't snap to the streets or other paths that are already drawn in here. And then you can draw your own line. You can say, boy, I'd really like to go down Blair Mill Road to connect to the power line trail. And then you can click on done drawing, and then you can even add a comment to that and then hit submit. I will not hit submit on this particular one, but gives you an idea of how you can add routes or add points to the map. So those are the two items on the back on the project website that you can participate in, the survey and the virtual project map. These are going to be open to the public until Thursday, May 13th. So you have a few weeks to get involved, and you know, helps. We're gonna do a lot of public outreach here to spread the word, to get more folks involved in this. And once we close things out on the 13th, we'll bring all that data in, and that'll help us start thinking about what the alternative routes are going to be that we'll come back to you for. Before I move on, we are doing some pop-up public meetings this upcoming Saturday. So if you want to talk to the planning team in person, we are going to be at a series of events and locations throughout the study area on Saturday. This is up on the website, so you can look these up. The weather's supposed to be beautiful, so we look forward to you. If you have any questions or kind of want to get into the weeds about some things, we will be out to answer your questions. All right, I'm going to get my presentation back up here. We have just a couple more slides left. All right, there we go. So yeah, as I said, go to the project website. You have from now through May 13th to take the survey, participate in the map, and then once we have all that data, we're gonna, over the summer, we're going to develop at least 3 different trail alternative routes to get to close this gap. And then what we will do, we will come back to the public late summer, probably around Labor Day timeframe, and you know, whatever format that is, we don't know. Hopefully we're able to meet in person by then, but we'll see how this year goes. But at that point in time, we will have different trail alternatives based on the feedback that we get from you. And by the end of the year, we will narrow down to one selected route alternative, We'll publish a report, and then that's when the engineering phase, pending funding for the engineering phase can start potentially in 2022. So like I said earlier, check out the website for the schedule for us on Saturday. Obviously, this picture was taken several years ago, but we will be wearing masks. We will be following COVID protocols. We will be outdoors for all of our setups. But we'll have a map of the study area available, so folks can take a look at that, and we'll be there to answer any questions. So thank you for your time. Like I said, I think we're about a little over schedule on the presentation. So I'm gonna pull up the questions that folks have been asking. And if you have questions, please continue to type them into the Q&A box.
I did answer a couple questions regarding the website, so I've reposted it in the question and answer box in case you missed it.
Okay. So one question is, instead of seeing the turnpike and railroad as an obstruction, is there an opportunity to use these existing byways to piggyback? I know this would be more challenging, but they are existing routes. So that's a really good question. We are going to be working with both of those agencies, with the Pennsylvania Turnpike Authority, and we will be reaching out to Norfolk Southern. So like I said during the presentation, Norfolk Southern has a very, very strict policy about rails with trails, or trails that are within their corridors. We're certainly allowed to cross their right of way in a grade separated manner. They typically allow that to happen, but running parallel, they're generally opposed to that. So it's not to say it's impossible. I've worked with other railroads before, and if you can find a mutually agreeable or mutually beneficial solution to an issue that the railroad may have, that the trail may solve, then there's definitely a potential there. So we will absolutely be looking at least parts of this trail that may run parallel to the turnpike or the railroad.
If I could add to that, Matt, is that originally when we first started planning for this trail all the way back in 1999, we actually did look to locate the trail along near the rail line, which is now owned by Norfolk Southern, but at the time was owned by Conrail. So the policies were a little different back then. It's the issue with locating these trails in the right of ways of like the turnpike or the rail is that they always need room potentially for expansion or to widen, and if the trail were in the way, that could be an issue. So that those are just things that we take into consideration during this process.
Yeah, and that's what makes it difficult. Because yeah, Brian's right. The railroads they think in terms of 100-year timelines, and while there's only a single track up there now, there may be a day where they want 2 tracks up there because traffic it keeps expanding. So, but we'll be working with the railroad and seeing what our options are with them. So yeah, we had a couple people ask about posting the link. I just typed that into the chat box, montcopa.org/cross-county-trail-east. That has all the information. One of the questions here is, and Brian, I'll have you answer this one. Will there be plans for a bathroom or at least porta potties?
Well, that is that's a good question too. We are finding that more and more, especially when we view our trails as, sort of multi-generational, places for people to recreate, is that we do find that bathrooms are an amenity that people are looking for. It's not out of the question. It's something that we'll take into consideration depending upon what type of staffing capacity we will have when we do the capital planning for these trails, especially if we can partner with other entities. It's very possible that we can look seriously at that.
All right, the next question is, are you going to be restricted on cost for this project? Has the grant amount or cost already been established?
The answer is no. That it hasn't been. There's been no cost threshold that has been established. This is actually why we're doing the feasibility study at this time. So essentially, the purpose of the feasibility study is doing an analysis of several different routes, all of which might have advantages and disadvantages, and might be more or less expensive, depending upon what types of routes and what type of terrain we may need to to overcome, especially if it requires bridges or tunnels or that sort of thing, which can obviously change the cost. So the plan going forward is to be as cost conscious as possible, and to do a thorough evaluation of all of our options, making sure that we're not doing just strictly the cheapest option just because it is the least expensive option, but making sure that the value and the accessibility is there. So hopefully, so as a part of this project too, I should also mention is a calculation of some preliminary opinions of cost as well, and that helps us do the evaluation as well.
Yeah, and so that's when we come back to the public around that Labor Day timeframe, and we'll be presenting the three alternatives. Those are the kind of things that we'll be showing to the public. Like, for example, if we're going to propose hypothetically a brand new bridge across the Turnpike and it's 300 feet long, that's a few $1 million alone right there. So that's why we want to try to find, usually using an existing crossing if we can. But as Brian said, you want to be able to balance the user experience, the safety value of it, the connectivity value of it. Those are all things that go into the study, and we'll be presenting that to you at that time.
It's also good to mention that we do have a group of municipal and community stakeholders who are will be reviewing this material, which will similarly be demonstrated in another public meeting, at least one more public meeting, if not two, actually. So all of those elements will be made public at that time.
Somebody stated that they had audio difficulties, and will they be able to view the recording of this webinar? So yes, we will. We are recording this webinar. It will hopefully tomorrow morning we can get it posted on the project website. So you can come back to this if you want. And then if you have friends or neighbors who you think would be interested in this, we absolutely want to be able to get as many people involved in the project as possible. So yes, this will be available. The next question is like more of a statement. Restricting parking on Davisville Road will have a negative impact on the small businesses and the community located along the area. In addition, the present parking was noted as overflow parking access for the proposed mid-rise apartments. This was noted by the Planning Commission. This needs to be taken into consideration. So yeah, absolutely, parking, is one of those things that goes into the routing, and if there's a road diet that takes place, and those kind of things, we do not want to be negatively impacting businesses whatsoever as a part of this. We don't want to be negatively impacting anybody, residential or business. So we're absolutely taking those kind of things into account. And then the next question we have here says, have plans of the relocation of the Davisville train station been reviewed when considering the location of a proposed trail? So yes, we're absolutely aware of the new train station relocation and what its impacts are on Veterans Memorial Park. So yes.
And so SEPTA, of course, as well, will also is a stakeholder for our study, and they will have ample time to review our plans and to comment and to ask for changes if and when necessary.
All right, just got another one in. I understand this is a feasibility study and not the final construction design, but you mentioned that it is envisioned to be a shared use trail with a 10-foot width. Is there criteria for maximum longitudinal slopes and cross slopes? From personal experience, I have difficulty on steeper slopes, i.e. some sections of the Horsham Power Line Trail. That's a very good question. Yes, there are criteria for maximum longitudinal and cross slopes. So cross slopes, so just to give people an idea, if you can see me on camera right now, cross slope is the slope along the width of the trail. So there are guidelines, ADA guidelines, Americans with Disabilities Act guidelines that state that you can't exceed a 2% cross slope, which is a very flat cross slope. It's just enough slope to allow the trail to drain off when it rains, but it's comfortable enough that somebody in a wheelchair doesn't feel like they're going to tip over. Now, longitudinal slopes, there's also Americans with Disabilities Act guidelines that we have to follow with trails. And it really depends a lot on the terrain. Unless you have difficult existing terrain, I'll give you an extreme example. I once worked on a trail project in Asheville, North Carolina, where it's very mountainous. And you obviously cannot bulldoze a mountain to build a trail according to the relatively flat ADA guidelines. Now, we're in an environment here with the Cross County Trail where we don't have that sort of impact. So I can assure you that this trail will be designed to the ADA guidelines. The maximum longitudinal slope that's allowed for ADA is typically 5%, a 5% running slope. So we absolutely want to take that into account. And you saw one of the slides I had earlier was looking at the steep slopes in the area and trying to either stay away from them or being able to manage those.
And that also goes back to why it can be difficult to sometimes to co-locate trails along with certain larger infrastructure elements like the Turnpike or the Norfolk Southern rail line, because they're often built at higher than the surrounding grade. So the drop off from those flatter surfaces can be pretty significant. So which is not generally very friendly to a more accessible design.
The next question is, does SEPTA have the same restrictions along their tracks as Norfolk Southern? Generally speaking, SEPTA has been more friendly to trails, but they understandably also have the same constraints and issues where they may want to expand their trackage in the future. And their right of way, they have to look out for what their interests are. They have to make sure that any sort of trail project is not going to conflict with their interests. but SEPTA has been amenable to trail projects in the past. If you're familiar with the Pennypack Trail, crosses the West Trenton line. There's a separate at-grade crossing with crossing arms and the whole deal. And then the Liberty Bell Trail in Lansdale, that has at-grade crossing as well. So SEPTA has been pretty helpful with trail projects in the past. Next question, any thoughts to installing safety or emergency stations like we see blue lights on college campuses? Devices that are hardwired to call emergency services.
That's a good question. That's it's not currently programmed in any budget that we have, but though we have had that discussion in our open space and trails planning section, that I think it's a good idea, and it definitely, especially in more populated urbanized parts of the trail. Sometimes it's harder in more rural parts of a trail, certainly, but that's if you're asking, are there any thoughts? Yes, there are some thoughts, though we haven't really scoped out anything in that regard. But otherwise, in terms of other electrical or otherwise infrastructure on trails, we have been looking at you're trying to get things more solar powered when possible. So the hard lining or the hardwired service that you're asking about, we haven't really talked about that, but I guess anything is on the table, but we haven't really skipped anything like that.
Next question is, will you consider using the lower spur of the Pennypack Creek Trail that runs direct east toward Davisville Road? Staying close to the creek, maybe going behind Eastern Tech School. Just a thought. That is a great thought, and that would be a good comment for the map.
I think just to clarify, I think he may be referring to a trail section that's located in the Pennypack Ecological Restoration Trust land. I think they call it the Pennypack Parkway, which dead ends into Pennypack Drive, which is, yes, right off Davisville Road.
So yeah, that stretch is a candidate. One of the concerns is there are some pretty sensitive habitats back in that area, and there's a concern that an increased trail use could see a degradation of that habitat. So, as I mentioned earlier, we talked about habitats and wetlands. Those are certainly things that we're going to be looking at as we study the feasibility of these routes.
Yeah, and also taking a look at the wiki map, as you hopefully all will be participating in that exercise. You'll be able to see other existing trails that you may want to connect to. Specifically, there's some in Veterans Memorial Park. There's the YMCA loop trail that's there, and then of course there's some trails located in the PERT area, the Restoration Trust area. So yes, important things to look at, connectivity certainly, and that map will help you locate them.
All right, we have just about up with our hour. There's no more questions. I'll leave it up for one more minute in case people have a last second question. But just to remind folks, check out the website. That's kind of the central nerve of everything is here, where we're keeping all the data, links to everything. So Even when we close out this portion of the feedback, when we come back to you later this year, this will be the place where we advertise the next public meeting. Once we have your emails, we'll use that too to give you the heads up that this is coming. We'll be in the media again. It's the same kind of sources that you found out about this meeting tonight. All right, it looks like we don't have any other questions. Brian, did you have anything else before we wrap up?
No, I think that's it. I did want to also thank, because I don't think I got a chance to earlier, this project is being funded mostly by a grant from the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission and their Transportation Community Development Initiative grant, which is a program that often funds planning projects that have a transportation element to it. And of course, trails are an important transportation infrastructure component, just as much as sidewalks and streets are as well. So yeah, so I think that about wraps it up, man.
All right, well, thanks to everybody for tuning in tonight. We had a really good turnout. Like we said, all this is going to be up on the website for the next 3 weeks. So make sure to help us spread the word. We want to try to get as much feedback as possible from folks from a wide variety of folks. So make sure you help us out and spread the word.
Great. Thank you all so much for attending and hope to see you on the trail.